Later. Got a frog in my throat trying to get away.
We're rolling. Stand by.
You want to put this over there for me?
My mic check good?
All
right.
We'll call it American racism. Pastor.
Can you stand up for us?
Stand up. On.
Stand up out of the chair.
Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is American racism, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about American racism, Pastor KWalker. And of course, Pastor Walker, let me welcome you to the show this morning and let our audience know that this is the beginning of a new season for us, and so we might stumble along in terms of trying to make sure that we've got everything together. But nevertheless, I do think that there's a pattern that we follow. And what I'd like for you to do today is to give us some information in reference to your background, your education, and some of your experiences. And then we'll get into a very, very general topic dealing with American racism. It appears that American racism might be different from any other kind of racism that we might know of. And so let's talk about it from that perspective.
Well, good morning, Dr. Haney, and once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on your show and talk about some things that, I think of great importance to not only myself and you, but to a lot of other people. My name is Pastor Kelvin L. Walker. My mother didn't name me Pastor, she just named me Kelvin. But I was born and raised right here in Nashville, Tennessee. Two good parents. They raised me right. I didn't always heed their information that they shared with me, but they were definitely good parents. They're both deceased now. Raised me right here, went to the public school system in Nashville, Tennessee. Was a character when I was younger, so it ended up, what happened, I ended up getting put out of the school system in Tennessee. And from there, they didn't have the prisoner pipeline in full effect then, so you could go in the military without having to have a GED or high school diploma or graduate from school. So I had gotten in some trouble at the age of 15. Actually, I shot at one of the boys growing up. And Judge Richard Jenkins thought it best that, I go into the military, and I had been working with a recruiter as opposed to spending, some time in the juvenile system. He thought it would be best if I went into the military. So I joined the United States Navy, went in the Navy, stayed in the Navy for like 19 months, and sailed around the ship, on ship and all that stuff like that. Got out of the Navy, went to OIC, Opportunities Industrialization Center, got a GED. There, I spent 6 months in their program, got a GED, and from there, I enrolled in Tennessee State University, and my desire was to become a fashion designer, but all at the same time, and when I was younger coming up, I was experimenting with drugs, and it really escalated when I got in the military, and when I got out and was still trying to pursue what I was trying to pursue, but at the same time, getting high and stuff, and my drug addiction just escalated and everything, and I ended up messing up my pursuit of my education at Tennessee State University because the heroin addiction outweighed my desire for education. And of course, the heroin addiction led to crime. And as I continue to commit crimes, I continue to be incarcerated and ended up incarcerated in Tennessee State Prison System. Stayed incarcerated for a period of 5 years total of my life. First time around 4 years, 1 month, 16 days, got out after only 7 months and was reincarcerated again because my behavior hadn't changed. I just learned how to become a better criminal as a result of being in the prison system. So, but after that, my drug addiction just kept on spiraling out of control. And then on August 24th, Dr. Haney, in 1986, God divinely intervened in my life, man. Just stepped in and put a stop to a 17-plus year drug addiction, called me in the ministry, and that's where I've been for the last 33 years. I've been a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, trying to spread the good news and trying to help, everybody that I can. I've been working in drug and alcohol treatment centers, and I've run my own program. I've helped people come out of the prison system, get on their feet and everything. So that's where, that's where I am right now, 33 years later. This is what I do, and I enjoy it.
Pastor Walker, the only thing that we can add to that is to say that we've heard this story many, many times.
Oh, yes.
But at the same time, it's a story that's worth telling because I think it demonstrates that you made tremendous progress and that you've had a tremendous impact upon a large number of people. And I know that you've had a tremendous impact upon this show because you've been with us such a long time, and each time we depend upon you to bring us good guests as well as good information. Now today, Pastor, you said that you wanted to talk about American racism.
Yes, sir.
And we'll get into that topic after we take our first commercial break.
All right.
But to me, that is a real topic, but you said that this is what you wanted to talk about. And I think that if we look at what's going on in the nation today, the politics of it, that racism plays a significant role
Absolutely.
in a large number of things that we do. And so this is a timely subject, but you wanted to call it American racism.
Yes, sir.
So we accept that.
All right.
And so when we take our first commercial break, we'll come back and we'll deal with American racism. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Pastor KWalker, and he has selected for his topic today, American racism. And Pastor, let's start off by not only talking about racism, but to sort of lay the foundation by saying when you say American racism, you were really talking about a different kind of racism because I think it brings us within the framework of what America is. And a lot of folks don't believe that America is a racist country because we have a Declaration of Independence that said that we declare these truths to be self-evident that all men, and et cetera, and et cetera. And I think everybody's familiar with that. But we also know that there's an underside to all of this, and this is what we want to talk about this morning. Let's talk about it.
Well, first of all, I believe the Declaration of Independence, when it says, all men are created equal, I think what it actually meant was all white men were created equal, not white women, not white children, all white men were created equal because everything was centered around the white man. And I want to be clear about something here off the top, and I may say it again. When I talk about American racism and when I talk about white men, I'm talking about a mindset, Dr. Haney. I'm talking about a mentality, a mindset, a thought process that I have come to label and identify as white man. And that's what it is, white man, not white men, white man. I'm not talking about white men. I'm not talking about white women. I'm not talking about white people. I'm not talking about the Caucasian race. I'm not talking about white boys or white girls. I'm talking about white man. It's a mindset that suggests and says that I run the world. I own the world. Everything revolves around me, and without me, nothing can exist. And I should be in charge. I should have ownership. And not everybody that's within the Caucasian race agrees with that mindset. There are many. That's why we have some of the freedoms today that we enjoy, because of the people that didn't identify with it, didn't agree with it, wasn't going for it, didn't condone it. As a matter of fact, they fought against it. You know, you're talking about the abolitionists and the people like that, the Quakers and stuff that fought against this mindset, the white man mindset throughout the years. And when it comes to myself personally, you know, I was born in March of 1955, Dr. Haney, and of course you've been here a few years longer than I have. Well, when I was born into a racially segregated society. And when I was born, for the first 10 years of my life, did not have any civil rights, because that act did not come into play until 65. So from 1955 to 1965, I didn't have any rights at all. My parents had been living longer than I had in this country, and they had no rights. Then my grandparents, my great-grandparents didn't have any rights. And then when I came on the scene, I came on earth, and I didn't have any rights, you know. So I didn't have a say-so.
You know, Pastor, when we talk about American racism, I'm also reminded that while racism is a terrible thing, that when we started out in 1619, and we think about how we started out, and we think about how long slavery existed in America.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
we came to this country primarily as slaves, eventually as slaves in 1619, and it was not until 1865 that we received our freedom. You see, in a real sense. And so to say that American racism, you can not only talk about something that was evil, but you can also talk about how Americans were able to overcome. And I think this is what you meant when you said that you're talking about the white man, not all white folks or black folks, a mindset and an attitude. Go on.
Yeah, you know, it's sad that we have to be in a society like that. But it's a reality, and the racism is systemic, and it's woven into the fabrics of our laws and our institutions and everywhere. And it's been deliberately designed to oppress a certain people. You know, you go to another country, and you bring another people who's living by another culture, they have another religion, and you bring these people into a country, and you enslave those people. And you enslave them, you put them to work to build a country, to build a nation, to build wealth for yourself, to be right. You're looking at them and viewing them as right next to the cows and the other work animals and stuff that you have out there. No different than a donkey. You know, you're trading them as you would trade any livestock, and you're treating them in a very inhumane way. You're feeding them, you're taking care of them, they're eating and everything, because all of that is for your benefit, you know, and that's that mindset. And then you enslave people. And what's so devastating about that, though we endured that, it's a cruel and inhuman system of slavery, you know, that freedom that you spoke of was really not really a freedom, because now you've stolen a people from a country. You robbed them of their culture, you robbed them of their religious practices, you robbed them of everything that they could identify with. You robbed them of their original names, and you gave them the slave master's name, and you brought them in here, you worked them and worked them and worked them and worked them and worked them, and now then you give them a so-called freedom, and without a promise. Abe Lincoln said, you know, we're going to give you 40 acres and a mule. What they do to Abraham Lincoln? They killed him. So when they killed him, the next president stepped in there, I believe it was Johnson, if I'm not mistaken. He stepped in there and just rescinded all of that. No 40 acres and a mule. So now here it is. You got a mass of people that's supposed to be free, but yet they don't have any means to take care of themselves, to provide for themselves. So now they got to figure out how to make this thing happen, because here it is, you just enslaved me for all these years. Then you come around and tell me, you give me a semblance of freedom, but you don't give me anything to help me to overcome this. So when you look at the African-American race, man, it's a very resilient race to be able to endure all of that, and then to be able to fight their way through, come through it, and overcome so much, man, challenges that were deliberately placed there. You know, here it is, you get free and say, okay, well, I tell you what, I got this piece of land down here. I'll let you work this land, and you'll be a, sharecropper. You will share the crop, and everything. You break the land, but at the same time, they were being cheated out of the land, and then it was just placed in debt. That system of debt just kicked in place right there. So now you got a people that's supposed to be free, but you enslaving them again to debt. Now they still, in order for them to survive, they still got to work the land. They still got to produce for you.
In total, Pastor, you can say that after 400 years of slavery, you see, that when we look around at the situation today, the African American had to be a great overcomer to even understand. To understand where we started from and where we are today, even though now we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Definitely.
But after 400 years of servitude, being classified as property, we are where we are today.
Yeah.
And so what we'll do, we'll take our second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Pastor Walker, and he's given us some information in reference to American racism. And Pastor, I think that what we should do in doing this final segment, last 10 minutes, let's see if we can sort of bring together all of the things that we feel that are necessary in order to keep us moving forward.
Yeah.
There's some things that we all, even though we started as slaves, and even though we were free, but there are still some things that happen among Africans that tend to hold Africans back. And so let's devote the last 10 minutes of this show to talk about how we might be able to overcome some of the challenges that we have today.
Yeah. Dr. Henry, that's why, it's important to me that when I talk to younger black men, I tell them, to check your DNA, your DNA, man. You don't really understand what you're made of. The fact that, our ancestors can go through what they've gone through, and then you look at some of the places that we are today. I still don't believe that we are as far advanced as we should be on a whole. But when you look out, you see a lot of things that we've done. We've accomplished quite a bit. We endured all of that, bounced back from all of that, and have been striving all throughout the years because of who we are, what's in us. So I tell people, don't look at yourself in a demeaning type way, but recognize what's in your DNA. You look back over the years, man, you got Black Wall Street. You hear people say the typical thing, right? Well, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstrap. Well, I can't pull myself up by my bootstrap, Dr. Haney, if I don't have boots.
Or straps.
Or the straps. So here it is. I'm reaching down to pull myself up, but I don't have anything to pull on to pull myself up. So we had to get inventive and pull ourselves up, man. And I tell you, in my own personal life, Dr. Haney, when I really had my first, I had experienced racism when I, coming up as a child, going to the school and stuff like that, and they segregated the schools, finally segregated the schools and stuff like that. And I experienced that. But my first real experiences with racism was when I went into the military. I went into the military, Dr. Haney. I already had this attitude, this mindset. And I got in there, and then I was experimenting, doing the drugs and stuff like that. And then when I was trying to excel, I remember in boot camp, I came in boot camp, man, I've always had the ability to just step out front and lead. So they made me a squad leader. Right off the top, man, they made me a squad leader in boot camp. And, as I was doing what I was supposed to do, my squad is in order, our part of the barracks is straight and clean and everything is in order. We ain't failing no inspection, and we tight. We in order, you know. And all of a sudden, they just took it away from me. Just took it. No, I had no explanation or anything like that. They just took it. You know, and the only thing I can lend it to is just, I mean, it had to be some kind of, I don't know.
You were a bad example.
I guess, yeah.
In a real sense.
Yeah,
you
true
know,
enough,
because
true.
if the idea is to keep Africans behind and back, then you really don't fit into that kind of category.
I see
and
you.
People seeing you will take examples from what you are doing, and so that's an attitude that a large number of folks face.
Yeah,
a large number of people have to deal with.
And it happens like that.
How to overcome.
Yeah,
and some of the recognitions that you're not receiving everything that you ought to receive.
Right.
And there's a feeling that sort of wells up within a person that makes him feel not as successful as he actually is, without recognizing that he has overcome it all.
True enough.
When you overcome slavery, being classified as property, something for 400 years, and then can walk out and say that you have overcome, then, you know, and you look around at some of the things that are happening around us and some of the accomplishments that people are making today. And of course, black folks didn't make all of these accomplishments by themselves.
No.
See, it's always been some very, very good white folks
without a
who
doubt.
themselves might have been racist, but they understood what fairness was all about.
Well, it took a lot, and you have to say this for the Caucasian race, that growing up in an environment themselves and being fed that racist mindset, it took a lot for those who did overcome it to overcome it. I'm pretty sure they had me to say, wait a minute, I'm being taught this, but my heart is telling me something else.
I've seen so many of that.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
I think we've all seen that, Pastor.
Yeah. And that's when they show up. They show up and say, wait a minute. I thought you just like I am. You know, we just, our skin tones are different. But if we, either one of us cut, we're going to bleed the same blood. It's not going to be different. You know, when we go in the bathroom, you know, what I excrete from my body, it's not going to be different any different what you excrete from your body. So it's like in my heart, I'm seeing something different than what I've been taught. So they overcame that, and to a degree where, you know, when the marches were taking place, they were out there. You know, when it was time for people who was escaping slavery, they was having an escaped slave and helping them get on their feet. But to go back to what you're talking about, how seeing you as a bad example, you take Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, the black African-American race, man, they were striving, man. They had businesses and stores and banks and all kind of stuff that they were having. But they went in and destroyed that that white man mentality, went in and destroyed that whole area because, no, we can't allow you to succeed. See, also, you know, there were African-Americans in the government, you know, when after slavery had ended and stuff like that. But all of that began to become diminished. You know, all these different laws came into place that were designed as well to keep black people down and keep them from doing certain things. You know, this thing with voter suppression, it just didn't just happen. It's been happening, you know.
It continues.
It continues to happen. And nowadays and age, we have a president, Trump, that's the commander-in-chief, the chief executive, the president of the United States of America, that's bringing all of this hatred and evil to the surface. Man, Dr. Haney, I was naive. I'll be honest with you. I was very naive when Trump was running for office, man, you know. And I think a lot of people may have been too as well. We figured like, well, Hillary Clinton's going to beat him, and she's more qualified than him for anybody. She was more qualified for any other Democratic candidates running for office anyway because of her experience in government. But at the same time, not just because of that, but because of Trump, the way Trump is, you know. And I was naive to think that there were not enough racist people in America that could get him into office. I was naive. I didn't think it would happen. I was just convinced, you know.
Very good.
Yeah, I didn't take it for granted that Hillary would win, but I was naive enough to believe that there were not enough racist people in this country that would put somebody like a Donald Trump
into office.
Yeah, who is just a imitation or a carbon copy of George Wallace into the highest office of the land. Not only that, having no political experience whatsoever. And you know, you can take a man to have no political experience. He said, I'm not going to let you see my tax return. He's talking crazy, and no respect for women and none of that stuff like that. What kind of mindset would want to put him in a man like that into office except that white man type mentality. Mindset? Because there's a fear that if people of color continue to come in this country, then America is going to be predominantly a country with people of color. So that white man mindset said, we got to stop this. Trump is so hell-bent on building a wall to stop immigration, not only illegal immigration, but he's trying to get legal immigrants, keep legal immigrants coming here. Chances are, Dr. Haney, Trump family wouldn't be here if the family had to have such a high IQ to get here, because his daddy, you know, he came here hustling. You know what I'm saying? So, but for him to do that, it's just the racism in this country. And then, man, we got a government right now, man, that's feeding into this thing and nourishing this thing, and it lets us know what we got in our government now.
One thing, in spite of it all, Pastor, one thing we will overcome.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
We always have.
We've met things that were worse than
yeah.
Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
We've been slaves.
Yeah,
you see,
absolutely.
We've been depressed and all of that. We've been fugitives and et cetera. We overcame all of those things. And so in spite of everything,
yes, sir,
we shall overcome.
Absolutely.
You know, it's the song. You know, we made that as our anthem.
Yeah.
We shall overcome, and we will overcome. There's
Absolutely.
no doubt about that. But let me thank you, Pastor,
yes,
for
sir.
being with us today. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning. that information in a topic.
Okay.
You know, so that we can call this.
The criminalization of poverty, or
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's a good. The criminalization of poverty. Okay. Let's deal specifically with black folks, okay?
Okay.
African Americans.
Okay.
And the criminalization of poverty. And that'll give you an opportunity, because I think that you have something to do with the criminal justice system and et cetera.
Yes.
And so that'll give, that sort of broadens what we're talking about.
Right.
And at the same time, we're dealing specifically with the African American and the criminalization of poverty, which has a good title.
Exactly.
And then we can introduce that as a title.
Okay.
And then have you to talk about, give us some information, background, education, and et cetera,
Okay.
in reference to that. And then during this second segment, which is 8 minutes, we get into what? The criminalization of poverty. And then we'll do that 8 minute, and then we'll do it 10 minutes.
Okay.
As such, okay?
Okay, let's do this.
African Americans and the criminalization of
poverty.
I think that
Okay.
that's sort of.
that's good.
Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. We're fortunate to have with us this morning Miss Dawn Harrington, and she's going to talk to us about the criminalization of poverty, African Americans and the criminalization of poverty. And Ms. Harrington, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you so much.
And let me sort of bring our audience into our earlier conversations, because I think we simply entered into parts of that conversation before we started the show in a real sense. But really what we'd like to do today is to have you to give us some information during this first 6 minutes about your background, your education, and some of your experiences. And then that second segment, which will be an 8-minute segment, it'll give you an opportunity to talk about the topic itself, African Americans and the criminalization of poverty. And then by the time we get through with that, we'll go to that 10-minute segment, and then we'll be able to bring all of the information together, and it'll be allow you to make some statements about any aspect of it that you wish.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you. So my name is Dawn Harrington. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, from North Nashville, and I used to work in the music industry. I have a bachelor's in recording industry, music business from MTSU, and a master's in information technology, MBA in information technology from Bethel University. And I'm the executive director of Free Hearts. Free Hearts is an organization that's led by formerly incarcerated women. And on one side of the work, we go into the jail, juvenile, and prison and work with women and girls who are incarcerated. And we go into 10 different schools and work with children whose parents are incarcerated. And so, but the other side of the work, we work to change like the policies that impact us and impact our communities. And through that, we have had a couple of major wins. One, we organized over 9,000 claimants for a lawsuit where they were criminalizing poor people in Rutherford County through a privatized probation company, and it was a $14 million lawsuit. The second one, we were able to pass a state law in this last session that went into effect on July the 1st that is community-based alternatives to incarceration for primary caregivers. And we did that also in conjunction with the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And we were the second state to pass that law. So now we're looking to, basically, we are mostly women of color, but we are a staff of black women right now, and we have a membership that is disproportionately women of color, just like the women that are impacted by the criminal justice system itself.
You know, when you talk about the criminal justice system and African American women, we've had shows dealing with that, but what can you say in reference to the African American female incarcerated person? Is there anything that separates the African American incarcerated person from the normal incarcerated female? Speak to it from that perspective.
Okay. Well, one of the things that, well, when I was incarcerated, I actually used to work in the music industry. I worked with artists that had major label deals, and I was in a town with a firearm that was mine, and it was registered and permitted here in Tennessee, but I was in another state and didn't realize the laws were different. But when I got into that situation and was later incarcerated for it, it really opened my eyes because I was, I had dealt with like my brother being incarcerated. We're from 37208, and it's the #1 incarcerated zip code in the whole country for people that live in high population zip codes. And we're from that zip code, and our office is in that zip code, and that zip code is mostly black women. So our community has been just completely taken over by this criminal justice system and this system of mass incarceration that has oppressed us. When we go this weekend, we were in Henning and Pikeville at the prisons there, talking to family members, and literally these prisons are on like plantations. They are, you drive past like literal field after field of like cotton, and then you get in closer and they have other crops as well, people riding around on tractors. And we were even told by one of our family members that we met in Pikeville that they are brought to Tullahoma to mow a lawn, and come to find out it's for a Confederate cemetery. So we haven't gone that far from slavery. It's still in our state constitution.
Okay, and so what we'll do is take this first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Ms. Harrington, Ms. Dawn Harrington, and she's given us some information about the criminalization of poverty. And of course, we're talking specifically about African American females, recognizing that some of the issues that are faced by all women in prison are similar, but we think that as Ms. Harrington is speaking, there are some things that might be specific in reference to African American females incarcerated. Talk about it from that perspective.
Well, one thing that we see is sentence disparities. We've seen, for example, one woman it could be the exact same kind of like elements to the case. One gets 6 years if you're white, but if you're black, then you might get 30 years or a life sentence for the same thing. And the only difference is if you're black or if you're white. And we see that all the time.
You mean
Plea
that it's
bargain-
that much disparity
Yes.
in terms of race in the prison system? Is that what we're saying?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're saying. The sentence disparities. And when we talk about like the criminalization of poverty, that's no different. And by criminalization of poverty, it's like through driver's license suspension and revocation, through bail that doesn't consider somebody's ability to pay, where you can buy your freedom or you can't buy your freedom, through electronic monitoring, through fines and fees, through not being able to vote if you don't have if you don't pay your fines and fees, if you don't have the money to pay them. This disproportionately also impacts black women, African American women, because African American women had the lowest income levels before they were incarcerated, highest unemployment levels after they get out, and black women are more likely to be separated from their kids through foster care system, and also more likely to be homeless post-incarceration. So there's so many levels that although we're not the majority of women in this state, we're disproportionately impacted by this criminalization of poverty in this state.
And so that's quite general in terms of African American females. I would imagine it probably applies to those not only in the state of Tennessee, but specifically, you know that in the state of Tennessee, this is the situation that African American females who are incarcerated face.
Yes, definitely. It's definitely not just in the state of Tennessee. I also work for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, and we see it all across the country. So, yeah, it's definitely not unique to Tennessee. It is pretty bad in Tennessee, though, and that goes without saying with the historical context of what we've had to deal with in the state of Tennessee, as far as like we're the state that started the private prison industry. We're the state that killed Martin Luther King Jr. We're the state that started the Ku Klux Klan, and you know, one of the last states to end slavery. And so it makes a lot of sense that the disparity that we see here and other parts of the South is exasperated. Yeah.
And so in a real sense, your organization is dedicated to trying to assist women African American females who are incarcerated. Is that the major purpose of your organization?
Yes, definitely. We are primarily African American women within our membership. We are trying to assist and also organize. And I think most importantly, organize. We know we have to assist because as we have been on those bunks as well, as we have been reentering as well, we know the real challenges that come when you come home. But what we're hoping is that once we can get on our feet, that we can also come together and work together to challenge these systems, because we believe that we can change these systems if we come together as a unit instead of working in silos or just looking at it like, oh, okay, it's something that I did wrong. Looking at it as an overall system that goes way back to slavery and comes up till now, and that's why we're being impacted in the way that we are.
You know, excuse me, when you think about African American female incarceration, we're also reminded that a large number of African American females who are young often have children. And why don't you speak to the impact that children have, that the incarceration of females have upon female children
Right.
in the system?
So that's why we worked on that law for 3 long years, and we finally got it passed, because Tennessee incarcerates more parents, more mothers than than most of the country. We were tied for 3rd place, and hopefully with the legislation that we were able to pass, that we can see some change. We've already seen some women coming home. Our first woman was an African American woman from Nashville that got out on this law, but we've known several women across the state that have used the law that just went into effect that we got passed to get out. And so, yes, we definitely know that to be true. Yes.
And so females who are incarcerated generally have a harder time than males in a real sense, but you think that African American females might have even a much harder time than others in a
Yes,
real sense.
we definitely know.
So race, we're saying, does race play an important part in the incarceration of African American females?
Yes, it definitely, it's like the most important part. It's like capitalism, it is definitely race. Like race, it's targeting groups of people. Anytime 37208 in North Nashville is so high up on the numbers that it's number one in the whole entire country, we know that race plays a part because we know who in our community lives in 37208. I lived on 14th Avenue in 37208. That's where I was raised up until I moved to Bordeaux. But still, and we had another zip code that also made that list, which was in East Nashville, that also is a high level of African American women. And so we definitely know that race plays the number one part because it's a system that was built to criminalize black people, and it was built to criminalize poor people.
And so what we'll do when we come back, we're getting ready for the second commercial break, and when we come back, Ms. Harrington, we'll talk about the aspects, many aspects of the criminalization of African American females.
Okay.
And I think that will give us an opportunity to have 10 minutes devoted to the specific information that you have. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Ms. Dawn Harrington, and she's given us some information in reference to African-American female incarceration. Let's look at the children of African-American females who are incarcerated and how they subsist in reference to that. I mean, how do they cope with their children outside and themselves being inside of prison?
Well, I could speak to the children's perspective as well, because we go into 10 different schools and work with children whose parents are incarcerated and deported. And mostly the students, we always do this one activity where we have them to write on a paper plate on the outside, what are the emotions and what are the feelings that you show on the outside and that you're able to show on the outside? And on the inside of the plate, they put, well, what are the things that you hold in and don't let anyone know that you're feeling? And always it's on the outside that are happy, they're trying to feel confident, they're trying to feel prepared or successful. And on the inside, it's like hurt, wanting to know why, angry, depressed. We've had literal, fourth graders that have tried to commit suicide over a parent being gone. I mean, it's just common sense that you wouldn't want your mom to be gone. And that's what we're doing, is ripping up families. And not to mention, most of the families that we're ripping up, they haven't even been convicted of a crime yet. They are being held pretrial detention, and the only reason that they can't get out is because they can't afford to pay bail. And that puts you into a position that then you may want to take a plea deal or something like that to get out and get back to your family as soon as possible, because anytime that you're gone like 1 or 2 days, then that's going to mess with your children. But if you're gone any length of time, it's just going to make it worse and worse. And so we see that with African American children, it's exasperated because a lot of the resources were tight beforehand anyway. And so this only makes that disparity just wider. And so we see, one thing that we see with the criminalization of poverty is that it is exasperated for the parents and for the children. And so, and basically with the children, they're more likely to have a parent locked up if they are black.
You know, oftentimes when we recognize the kind of world we're living in now, we have all of these children who are incarcerated, who on the borders and et cetera. Speak to that. I mean, that must be a very, very difficult situation for a mother to have a child incarcerated under those kinds of conditions, with no real charge. Just speak to that.
Yes, that's definitely a difficult situation. We go into the juvenile detention center as well, and it is traumatic. One thing we don't like to, one study basically says that it could make you more likely to be incarcerated if you have a parent incarcerated. So not only does a mom being incarcerated, not only does that, impact their family at the time, but it's an adverse childhood experience. It makes them more likely to then have future justice involvement, and it's just a generational cycle that continues, and that we need to just end. And so with the kids in juvenile detention, we're paying $315 a day to house them in juvenile detention. And when are we investing in African American children $315 a day before they get incarcerated? Why would we be willing to spend that type of money to have them, especially pretrial? We know several kids in there that have been in there 2 or 3 years. And if they've been in there 2 or 3 years, we're talking like millions of dollars when we're talking about a few kids. When have we made those investments in our African American children before they've got into this justice system? So it's a investment of resources that needs to go into the families and needs to go into actually addressing poverty of African American families, period. And then we can't criminalize the poverty of African American families if we're actually investing in our families and investing in our youth.
And so to have all those young people incarcerated away from their families will have a tremendous psychological impact upon not only the children, but the parents as well. Is that what we're saying here?
Yes, it definitely does. We have a participatory defense group that meets in Magruder Family Resource Center from 6 to 8 on Tuesdays. And what we do, we have family members that are there fighting for their loved ones, and a lot of them are youth that are incarcerated, and most of them that come in are black women, and literally that are trying to figure out what can we do to help our child that's going through this situation. They're innocent, or they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. They weren't the one that did anything. They were just in the vicinity or in the area. Whatever the range of things that is, if you can't get them out, and then I don't have the money to get them out, they have a bail of $200,000, or they have a bail of $300,000, and that's $20,000 or $30,000 to get them out. I don't have that money, and us just trying to come together and come up with ideas. So it definitely affects the whole family and the whole community, because we're all tied together.
You know, I've often thought of seeing these kinds of situations, incarcerated young people, children, et cetera. I've often thought of how I would feel if my child was incarcerated like that and away from me and et cetera, or that one day your child is with you and then somebody come along and the next day he or she is gone forever and et cetera. That must be a traumatic experience, not only for the child, but also for the parents as well and everybody else that's associated with that child.
It definitely is. I mean, we see moms that come in every single week that they just want to do something, and you feel like in such a state of helplessness. That's why it's good that we like come together, but it's still, we have a long way to go, and we know that we have to change the laws that are causing our kids to be held pretrial detention. We actually are advocating for a community reinvestment youth diversion. It's a law that's a piece of legislation that's pending. And we hope we started at the beginning of last session, and we hope that this year we can get a significant push to where kids can go home to their families. And if it's pretrial, they can get the support that they need and they can go through the process, but not be taken out of school, taken away from their family, not being able to do and participate adequately in their defense, and that they can keep going. So hopefully we can get that passed in this session.
You know, to incarcerate a child like that also creates a psychological situation that will eventually make the child a criminal.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, if you're locked up and denied and et cetera, then there's nothing else for you. And those of us who live outside of that and we see those kinds of situations, what do you think people can do in reference to that? I mean, when we talk about the mass incarcerations, what would you suggest that Americans do?
I would, first of all, suggest that if you want to get involved, you can follow us at freehearts.org. We also have a survey that we're circulating around. It's bit.ly/it-is-not-a-crime to see what do you feel about this. Lend your voice to let us know what are the changes that you want to do for your community, for African American women and for African American families. What are the laws and things that you want to change? How do you want to get involved? And what are your experiences with this? And also, if anybody wants to come down, if you have a family member or a loved one that's currently facing the criminal justice system, you are not alone. Come join us at Magruder Family Resource Center on Tuesdays from 6 to 8 p.m. And we are just a community of people that are coming together to, one, fight the individual cases, but two, to make this a system that is fair and just for all people, including us African American people and families.
And so what we're saying here is that people can do something. I mean, we should not all just sit around and cry in reference to it, that by coming and doing and dealing with folks like you and your group, we can at least put a voice to some of the things that we're talking about here. And so let me thank you, Ms. Harrington, for bringing us that excellent information. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.